Yo, what's up, guys? It's Steven with The Forge. So it's been a minute. I'll be doing days 31 through 36. There's been some stuff going on in my family. My wife's out of town, and we lost a few family members on my wife's side and my dad's side. So super sad. Pray for both sides. My dad lost an aunt, and my wife and I lost a nephew. And actually, I lost an aunt too. So. I don't know why I communicated that way. That was weird. But yeah, so, pray for them. There's a lot of change going on, a lot of things happening. But I'm so excited for tonight. So I stayed up all morning this morning getting everything ready, got my notes ready. We're going to be finishing out the book of Genesis. That is Genesis 45, sorry about my pages, to Genesis 50. And then we're going to be picking up in Exodus chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. And we have a few chapters from Matthew sprinkled there as well. So I'm going to be doing the rundown, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson that I've learned. So in day 31, Genesis 45, Joseph then finally reveals himself to his brothers. And his brothers got scared, and he said, Don't be grieved, don't be scared. God sent me before you to save our people, to save your life. And then after that, after he reveals himself to them, he then sends them to go get their father, Jacob. And Jacob, when his brothers went and told Jacob that Joseph was still alive, Jacob really didn't believe him. Jacob's like, yeah, okay. But eventually, Jacob believed him, and Jacob went with them down to Egypt. And verse 46, God told Jacob not to be afraid. And what I thought okay, hold on, let me back up a little bit. So also during this time when Joseph is sending his brothers to go get his father and his from the land of Canaan, then Joseph Pharaoh communicates to Joseph's family, like, hey, go ahead and tell him to bring what he's going to bring, but we got the best stuff here. And then after that, in Genesis chapter 46, after Jacob finally believes that Joseph is alive, God tells Jacob in a dream to not be afraid to go to Egypt because he will be with them. And that they will be brought from that land back home. Basically, they will be brought from the land of Egypt to the land of Canaan, which we know to be the promised land. And when they left, Jacob by himself brought 70 people with him, besides his sons. Joseph, when he sees his dad coming with his 75 members, they weep and they're holding each other. They come to Joseph, then tells Pharaoh, hey, my family are farmers and my family tends livestock. They can do what they have to do. And then in day 32, Genesis 47, Pharaoh then gives them the great land of Goshen since his brothers confirmed that they were farmers to Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh put them in charge as their chief herdsman of his livestock. And then during this time, after Joseph's family receives this land in Goshen, the the famine's still happening. And then people in Egypt, the Egyptians are coming to Joseph, and Joseph is dealing with this famine well. They're asking Joseph for all these things. They give him all kinds of stuff, and they end up selling themselves and their land to Pharaoh. And they are able to eat food. And then at the end of that, which of course, typical politics, Joseph is able to institute like a tax on the people of Egypt, saying, since you sold yourself and all this stuff is happening, you're going to pay this tax back to Pharaoh. But during this time, when Joseph is dealing with these people and they're selling themselves into slavery and they're getting rid of all the things, his family, the Israelites, are living in the hills of Goshen, the land of Goshen, and they're multiplying and being exceedingly bountiful. And then day 33 in Genesis 48, Jacob blesses Joseph's sons. And then we see another weird thing. So you see a father's blessing is super important to his sons. And then even a grandfather's blessing is super important to his sons. I find that my dad is super important to me. When he tells me things, I really take it to heart. I think about it, I digest it, I consider it. And it would be cool one day for my dad to bless my sons before he passes on, right? Super cool. And so Joseph, remember, has been separated from his family this whole time. Jacob then finally meets Joseph's sons, and then Jacob blesses the younger one before the older one. And Joseph gets a little upset about that. Joseph gets upset because the younger one was blessed in a manner that the older one should have been blessed. And Jacob says, "No, I get it, Joseph. He is the younger one, but still, he will be greater than his older. Ephraim will be greater than Manasseh, although he is younger." Imagine being the younger brother. And then the same day, day 33 in Matthew chapter 14, the gospel, there's so much to dissect. So I just wanted to pick out some key spots. Everyone knows John the Baptist. A lot of people miss the point that John the Baptist was beheaded because King Herod saw a woman dancing and he liked her so much. So he offered her a promise because of her skills. And she said, "I want the head of John the Baptist," because her mother wanted his head so bad. So he killed John the Baptist. Super sad. And then day 34 in Genesis 49, Jacob blesses his sons one last time, and then Jacob requests to be buried with his ancestors, right? He wants to be buried with his family in the land of Canaan. And then Genesis chapter 50, Joseph takes his father to be buried with Pharaoh's blessings. Pharaoh says, "Go on, bury your father." And then Joseph reassures his brother after so okay, check this out. So Joseph buries his father, and then his brother's probably thinking, "Oh, there goes our protection." And then Joseph reassures them, like, "Hey, I'm not coming after you. I'm not replacing God. God used me to preserve our family. What you meant for evil, God meant for good." And we know it's crazy. Joseph dies at 110 years old. And before he dies, he reminds them, his people, that God will deliver them to the promised land from the land of Egypt. He'll take them back home. Day 35, we're going to see how fast a generation of people forget. So, Exodus 1, the Israelites grew great in the land. Remember, they're in the land of Goshen, and Joseph helped set his people up. They're growing and growing and growing. That whole generation of Joseph and his brothers have passed on, and that Pharaoh passed on, and there's a new Pharaoh. So, you have two new generations of people, and the new Pharaoh's like, "Whoa, the Israelites are getting huge. We got to take care of them. We got to punish them. We got to kill their kids." So Pharaoh wants to enslave them to make them hard because he's afraid they're going to rise up with their enemies and try to overtake Egypt. And then what you also find is that he then tells the Hebrew Israelite midwives to kill the sons when they are born, but leave the daughters alive. But the Hebrew Israelite midwives feared God and didn't do so. When Pharaoh would come and say, "Where's the kids?" They'd say, "Man, the women are so fast at rearing children when they give birth, they're gone, they're out." So then Pharaoh wasn't buying it. Then he starts having his troops going and throwing these babies to die. But God protected those women because they feared God and kept those children safe. And then we'll see also on day 35 in Matthew chapter 15, Jesus teaches us that what comes out of a man's heart is what is stored up. What comes out of a man's mouth is what's stored up in his heart. We're going to revisit that at the end of this lesson. We're going to revisit Matthew chapter 15. And then we see in Exodus chapter 2, this is day 36, we see in Exodus chapter 2 and 3, Moses was saved, right? His sister put him in a basket. He floated down. He was saved by Pharaoh's daughter. Then you also see that his mother then nurses him. And now Moses is a grown man. And Moses kills a slave driver. He's out there and he sees the slave driver dealing harshly with the Israelites. He kills him, hides the body. This next day, he sees another couple of guys arguing, and then they say, "Hey, man, are you going to treat us like you treated that slave driver?" Then Moses flees. Pharaoh hears about it. He's trying to search him out and kill him. Didn't happen. Moses is out in the wilderness, and then Moses, this guy is lucky. He's out by a well. He meets a Midian's priest, a Midian priest's daughter. They're out there getting water, and then some shepherds are giving them a hard time, and Moses sticks up for them. They leave, and then the father's like, "Hey, who's this guy that was protecting you?" They went and got Moses, brought him back, and Moses stayed with the Midian priest and his family. And the Midian priest gave Moses Zipporah for marriage. And then we see in Exodus chapter 3, this is when Moses meets God in the burning bush. I'm going to read it to you. Exodus chapter 3, verses 3, and we'll go to 10. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside to see this great sight, why this bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him in the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for this place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the land, out of the hand of Egyptians, and to bring them from the land to a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites, the Amorites and the Perizzites, and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of the Lord has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So we see that all this is leading up. Joseph was preparing the way, save the Israelites during this time of famine that was across the whole land. They then are in this land, multiplying exceedingly great, doing great. A whole generation passes. Of course, everyone forgets, like we always do. Then Pharaoh enslaves them, tries to kill their children. Moses then runs away, goes to the wilderness, marries a priest's daughter, tends a flock, runs into God, and God says, Now, Moses, I'm going to send you to deliver my people. And I remember Joseph, before he died, reminded them that God will bring you back to your land. So God is delivering on that promise. God never fails. Lesson number one. God always brings forth what he says he's going to do. And Moses, as you'll see in this chapter, will give a lot of excuses, and God's still going to send him. God's going to stretch out his hand to the Egyptians, and they will find favor in the Egyptians. And then you'll see, as we read this Bible these next couple of years, especially in the Old Testament, people will know the Israelites' names because of what God did before them. The scene is set. Joseph, God used him. God put him in slavery so he can then break forth from that slavery into freedom, be in a place of power, rescue God's people. Then God's people multiplied greatly. Then they were enslaved. And then God now is using Moses, who was in the wilderness because of because of what happened, because he killed a man. He's in the wilderness hiding, and God says, now I'm pulling you out of hiding, and you are going to go back to where you were. You're going back to bondage, and you're going to take my people out of bondage into freedom. And that's the representation of the gospel. We are all lost in our sin. We are in bondage of our sin, and God rescues us and then frees us. And so that's what I want to go back to when we're talking about Matthew chapter 14, I believe is what it was. Let me look at my notes. Matthew chapter 15. Sorry about that. (15, 18). But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile the man. Today I was actually after Bible, so we have a Bible study at our house, a real good lesson. My dad and I were having a pretty heated discussion earlier, and we were talking about just ministry and what we think is best, specifically what I think was best, because I used to be in ministry. I feel like I failed, honestly, and sometimes I just get triggered and I get emotional. And then when we were sitting in the kitchen, I'm just thinking and I'm looking, and I'm like, man, God is so much bigger than my feelings. God is so much bigger than my plans. And so I wonder, when I get frustrated, when this hurt and this trigger comes out of my heart, why do I allow these things to live inside of me? Why do I allow self-doubt to live inside of me? Why do I allow self-disappointment to live inside of me? Why do I allow hate to live inside of me? Go on the list. That's my struggle. But what's yours? What do you have inside of you that comes out of your mouth? The treasures of your life. Because that's what defiles you. What goes in, we can do something with it. We say, Father, take this from my mind. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to sin against you, Lord. We could do that. But if we let it live there and it comes out of our mouth, it defiles us. And Jesus even takes it a step further earlier when he says that you've heard that it is said that if you commit adultery, it's a sin. But I tell, and I'm paraphrasing, but I tell you that if you look at another person with lustful intentions, you have committed adultery in your heart. Jesus is calling us to having a pure and clean heart. Moses delivered the Israelites from the bondage of slavery. Jesus delivers us from the bondage of slavery and sin. Places of disappointment, places of frustration, places of sadness, all these things, they exist, and to deny them is foolish, but they have no place in our heart. We need to make room for Jesus Christ so we can live out the fullness of his cross, the fullness of his mercy, and the fullness of his goodness. I'm sorry it's been a while. It's been a rough couple of days. It's been an interesting week. Death is coming to all of us, and it's really sad. I miss a lot of people I find really important to me. One of them I grew up with, and I would have never thought that we'd be at a funeral for him at a super young age. We've known each other our whole lives, and now he's gone. I can never talk to him again. Sometimes I wish I could. Actually, most of the times I wish I could because we used to talk a lot. There's other people that I went to church with that the same. There's a person named Tommy. He meant a lot to me. Same thing. I can't talk to him anymore. But right now, I have the time as much as you have the time to make life count for Jesus Christ and salvation today. We don't know if we have tomorrow, but we know we have today. So my challenge to you is to be better and live better. And if you want to be a part of our meeting, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and send a flyer out to a couple of people. You're more than welcome to Zoom in with us. I love you guys, and I really appreciate you being here with me. You're all really important to me, and pray for me as my heart is stirring. I'm not sure why. You guys have a great day. Bye.